Hello, and welcome to episode 2, I believe, of the official Hobby Hall. Actually, no, episode 3. Let's get that right. Episode 2, the previous recording from last week, will be released today on YouTube if you've missed it or you want to catch up. But with that being said, welcome to today. So, back to our regularly scheduled content of painting some Warhammer on a Sunday afternoon and just enjoying a little bit of hobby chat and seeing what we can come up with. So, last few weeks, well, about 3 weeks or so, I have been working my way through building up and painting a Legions Imperialis Knight household, which should total just over 4,000 points, and we are very, very close to being finished. Quite literally only have 2 units, so to speak, to do, or 2, which includes a couple more Knight Pytherions, which we did in episode 1, and also a unit of 9 Armigers with the Helverine configuration, which is on the desk currently. And I also decided to put down a sample of Knights of different classes that we've already completed, so that you get an idea of what the Knight household is going to look like. And just recently also played a game with one of my team members here, and my personal partner as well, and tested out the Knights and their rules, and they are good fun. Don't feel overpowered, don't feel too underpowered, they feel quite nice, they seem to work, so they're quite good fun. So let's have a look at what we've got today and get straight on, shall we? So there we are. I'll just give you a little view of the desk. You have to mind the rather unsightly bit of paper there, but we all know what that's like. So let's start with the big old Pytherions. So these were started on streaming a few weeks ago and have been since finished up, and I have to say they are looking rather tasty. Did a little bit of work with some transfers as well, just on the shoulders there, and got a little custom banner as well at the bottom there. So they're looking quite good. When I first looked at the rules, I thought they looked a bit underwhelming for their points, but having now tried them out, turns out they're quite effective. They do work quite well, and they're reasonably tough as well. So they're quite good fun. That's a big old Pytherion. We've then got the Acastus Knights, and we've got the Lancer here. Now I'm particularly happy with this one as well. Get some nice posing on it. Got some decals. Get a little bit of personal heraldry on the banners. And the shield plates. A little bit of a sort of glowy effect on the spear there. And there's even a little bit on the shield. And these again are wonderful in the game. They work really well. Did some serious damage and quite good fun. They can chunk up the board very quickly with their charge move. I think they've got an 18-inch charge move they can make in Legions. It makes them very effective at getting into the mix. You've got a little Death Guard Marine on the bottom there, just for a little bit of spice on the base. Most recently, we started these guys last week, so that video will be up on YouTube at the end of this stream at about 5 o'clock. And again, getting in some work with some transfers there, showing off some personal heraldry, and some cool little effects as well on the shoulder pads. Now that's not painted on, that is actually a transfer that you get with the kit, which is quite nice. I have to say I was quite happy with the look of that. They're very cool. They do look great. And all these are magnetised as well, so the Pytherions and the Cerastus Knights don't have any mags in them because there's not really any options in the kit. In fact, there's no options in the kit. Whereas the Crestores actually have quite a few options, so we've got magnetic arms to swap out for the Thunderstrike gauntlets. I've also got all the Reaper chainswords all painted up as well, and different weapon options as well for the ranged weapon option. And also the rocket pods as well can come off, as they are a 5-point upgrade, so you might not always have the points for them. But they are, for a 5-point upgrade, you get a couple of extra shots with some AP. Decent range and barrage, so they can fire outside of line of sight, so I think they are well worth having. But, you know, if you need that extra 5 points to get another tastier unit in, then, you know, you could drop them. It probably wouldn't cause you too much issues. But yeah, these are great. These work really well. Nice, chunky little units. And then we have got our first set of Armigers with the Warglaive configuration. Now, there is 9 of these, all painted up and ready, and have actually been used. And I've just dropped that and snapped that. That's not ideal. So, yeah, that's a bit of a pain. So I'm going to have to fix that now. That's fine. We can do that live on camera, I suppose. So once we get started, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be painting up some Armigers in the Helverin configuration. So we've got the Helverin autocannons, or Armiger autocannons. So we're going to keep this model to hand so that I've got a reference for where I paint everything. Not that I should need it, but you know, just in case. So we will have a quick look at that. You just have to excuse me a second. I've just had a message from my. Oh no, it's fine. That was just a part of the team chat there. Just seeing if one of them wanted to jump on the stream and have a chat, but they are at work today, so that's not going to be possible. Everyone seems to work on a Sunday in the team, apart from myself, so it will tend to just be me on stream for the foreseeable, I think. Pop these guys to one side. But hopefully one day, or at some point, we'll have some options for some tag-alongs as well. Just going to grab a little bit of super glue here. This is going to be a little bit tight on that. In fact, that was so tight it's pulled the whole cap off. I forgot that this one's like that. I don't know why. I seem to have a little bit of an issue sometimes with getting the lids on and off some of these bottles sometimes. Let's just grab a little bit of glue on there. Now, if this doesn't work, these are actually 3D printed models. And I have discovered that you can actually sort of weld these back on using a bit of photocure resin, which does work rather well. Is there any glue left in that? Yeah, there is a little bit. Oh, don't want too much. There we go. I'll just try and seal that back on. Okay, just give that a second to stick. Hopefully that'll be alright for now. I don't think it's right. No, it's still a little bit loose. Oh, I've managed to get a couple games out of these guys now and moving them around, and I haven't broken once. And then, of course, when I'm on stream live, I managed to drop one and snap his arm off. It's just typical, isn't it? Okay. Let's hold that in place for a second. Put that back on. Really doesn't want to stick. I think it might be alright. I'll pop him up there out of the way, just so I've got him as a visual reference. Right then, let's begin. So let's actually get on to some painting. I'm going to move a couple of these out of the way. Probably going to do them in sets of 3, as they are in units of 3 typically. So I normally like to paint them up in stages, particularly when I'm doing a little block like this. Pop that to one side. So let's begin. We need a brush of appropriate size. That looks like a decent one to do this little Armiger's armour panels. We're going to crack on getting some paint down. Might have to excuse a little bit of rattling from the ball bearings in the pots. So I do actually move all of my Citadel paints into droppers. One, because I use a lot of airbrushing where I can, and two, because they are much more efficient, shall we say, to use on my palette. I'm able to control how much goes on, usually relatively easily. Sometimes not so easily, but do what you can with what you've got. So first stage of doing my knights here is to just block in all the armour panels with a bit of Mephiston red. So we're just going to go in, find those armour panels and slap on some red. Now I don't need to be particularly careful here because we're going to go over all the metal banding again later with my trim colour, so we can just slap this on pretty haphazardly, trying roughly to stay within the lines, but I'm not too concerned about spilling over too much. The great thing about these is they are quite small as well, so I can get around most of the armour pretty quickly, which is nice. So I will reference what I'm up to as we go through, but obviously I'm not going to repeat the steps continuously because that will get quite boring quite quickly. There's another message on the team chat. Let's have a look, see what's going on here. Okay, yep, so it looks like the team is all out and busy at the moment. Most of them are at work. Zeta himself is currently off with Christmas and family events at the moment, but he should be returning to the streams soon, whether that's alongside myself or whether he'll be running his own streams every now and then, or regularly. I'm not quite sure what his plans are in terms of running streams at the moment. I am thinking about running an extra shorter stream during the week as well, so we might have a couple of streams going of varying lengths throughout the week, and all of them will be recorded and transferred over to YouTube as well. If you miss them, you can still catch up and listen to us drone on about what's going on and what we're up to. Might entertain you while you're doing your own painting, or maybe send you to sleep. Maybe the dulcet tones are just what you need to knock you out in the evening. Whatever you get out of this is up to you, so long as you're getting something out of it. There we go. So we've had some we've got some improvements coming in terms of content for the channel and our overall look and appearance. We've got nice new branded t-shirts which have all arrived just before Christmas, which is fantastic. In fact, I am wearing one now, but this apron kind of hides it all. So I won't be able to show that off just yet, but you'll start seeing that all appear in thumbnails and videos very soon, as we're hoping to get another set of podcasts recorded at some point during the Christmas break that will go live on YouTube soon. We've got another episode coming out between Christmas and New Year for certain, which will be in our old setup, and hopefully we'll have some new backdrops as well to our videos, so you'll be able to have something a little bit more visually appealing in the background, potentially. And then we've got a host of new content all due to be picking up in the new year. So we've got plans to get our back reports finally on the channel. That's taken a massive backseat to everything else at the moment, but hopefully that will be coming soon. In addition to that, we've got some bonus videos on the way, including a couple of crafting based videos, which we've kind of alluded to in previous streams already, as well as some new ones that I've got my eye on and contemplating doing at the moment, now that we've got some more cameras that we can work with, which could involve models or terrain or other useful assets and features that we could include. Yeah, that was a bit, I think if I remember right, I put the red in there. Yeah, that looks about right to me. Now this is the only bit where I'm a little bit more careful, because I don't really want to repaint things if I don't have to. So there's a couple of vents in the back here which I want to keep grey, and this handlebar here as well. I want to keep that unmarred. So we're just going to be a little bit more careful around these bits and around the carapace gun as well, which interestingly doesn't have any rules in the game, which is a little bit disappointing really, that they didn't bother giving the melter guns and the stubbers rules. But I suppose that is what it is, because you get the you do get the little stubbers and melter guns on your Questoris Knights. They get the rules, but your little Armigers don't. Which can't decide whether that's okay or not really. They seem to perform reasonably well, so I guess they don't really need it. And I don't really think I'd want them costing any more either, because they are 180 points for 3 of them, and you can't take them individually. You have to take them in the blocks. So I don't know that I'd want to be paying more points for an extra melter gun shot, to be perfectly honest, as they're not the most reliable shots in the world. Do a little bit of damage, but it's a little bit incidental in Legions Imperialis scale. That is, if you're coming into this from 40k, the melter gun is not the big bad weapon it is in that, although to be fair it's probably not as big and bad in 10th edition as it used to be. Not with the way they've changed the way that weapon works now. It's more of an anti-heavy infantry weapon really. It's not even really an anti-light vehicle weapon, because even most light vehicles it can't actually penetrate or damage very well. I mean, that's better. I suppose it depends on the classification of light vehicle, I suppose. If you're talking bikes and buggies and stuff, I suppose it's still quite effective in that regard, but it can't deal with transports or anything like that particularly efficiently. Not most motor guns anyway, I'm sure there might be some exceptions. But once upon a time these things used to be very effective at just plinking wounds off a vehicle. Not so much anymore. Well, I've definitely got a taste for painting Knights and Titans now. I think it's pretty much a no-brainer now that I might be starting a Knight army for 40k. Which I'm aware that competitively or game terms they're not very good. But one, that don't really bother me too much. I'm confident enough in my capability that I'll have some fun with them and hopefully win some games. But I've got some ideas of trying to run them in a similar way as to how I run them in Legions, which would include actually bringing some sort of auxiliary units as well. And with the Grotmus detachment for Knights and Chaos Knights, I've got something to work off there to sort of design my own detachment for the time being, unless GW decide to release something similar to what I'm looking for, which would be basically swapping out the Scutari for Imperial Guard essentially, or Astra Militarum, so that I could run some Solar Auxiliary inspired models. But in the interim, I've got some Alpha Legion models which I can that are all magnetised, which I can do some gear swaps with and use them as a Death Watch Inquisition addition to the army. So my thinking at the moment is I'll run some Inquisition units alongside some Knights to make a little bit more of a balanced army that might be a little bit more capable in game. And doesn't need to be hyper competitive, because I don't play in tournaments or anything like that. It'll only be the games I play casually or games we play on the channel. But very much at the moment the focus is going to be on Legions. So we are looking at starting to look at Legions rules and playing Legions on the channel and doing some battle reports, which we're going to do in a slightly different style to what you might be used to. Very much going to be narrative focused shows, and they're realistically they're going to be less like a battle report and more like a show. So with some voice acting going on, and hopefully some nice cinematic shots as well, which will help sort of tell the story of the battle that we play out. You will see dice rolls and whatnot, but you're not likely to see the players involved so much. It's very much going to be focusing on the models and the characters in the narrative of the game. And we've already got a couple recorded from last year, or 2024, which haven't been edited down yet. They've been started, but there was a few events that caused some delays and then a change in direction. So they are on their way, and hopefully in the first couple months of 2025 we'll actually release those as a sort of a two-parter story. Potentially we might do a third part to that story, or we might carry on with other narratives and projects instead of that, but we'll see. As we very much are going to be heading into the realm of Legions as our primary game of choice, so we can tell some big scale conflicts and narratives that are a little bit more befitting the scope and scale of Warhammer 40k, I think. And the key is we are going to be setting most of our stories in the 40k era rather than the Heresy 30k era, which is obviously what Legions is primarily designed for, because we've got ideas to bring in concepts and units and even entire factions from the 40k era. So one of our team is actually working with an Eldari army with Legions rules that we've found a nice community art made rule set for, which we may make some adjustments to as we play test it and see how it feels. And we're also bringing in some units of our own design as well. And we're also going to be sort of house ruling a few things that might need changing, or we feel be better for the game, or what we want to achieve. So we've got quite a few little addendums and modifications. We've added one unit to the game already in the Sokar pattern Stormbird, which we feel has already been quite well balanced with our rules. So we feel that that's okay. In fact, we've played a couple of games where the things just didn't want to die, and I've just played a game against two of them with my Night House, and we managed to knock both of the Stormbirds out of the sky relatively comfortably without too much hassle. So I don't feel like they're overpowered or underpowered, really. It just depends how they're used, and that's pretty much what you want a unit to be. You want it to be something that performs well when used correctly and in the right circumstance, and is also easy enough to deal with if you want to focus that unit. And I feel that the rules we've got for that have achieved that goal. So I'm pretty happy with those. But we've got a few more things. I mean, we've changed some rules that we feel might need modifying, like fallback, for example, has been changed a fair bit. So instead of falling back now, double move, we've reduced that to just your standard move, because we found that when vehicles, for example, were falling back, they were quite literally just skedaddling straight off the table almost every time because of their long movement ranges, and even infantry weren't exactly far behind. However, so that works out quite well, and we've played that a little bit, and it seems to work. You get an opportunity to rally your troops, which is nice, especially if they get fail morale early on. There's definitely a chance that you'll be able to recover that unit and actually use it in the rest of the game, which is quite nice. We that's kind of the way we envision it should work. So that's the house rule that we've got with that one. And recently just changed another part to fall back as well, which is in the combat phase. When you fail combat in traditional legions, you actually you just fall back out of combat and there's no further consequences, which I feel is a little bit anticlimactic for what's supposed to be happening there. So we just changed it to you take your morale test. If you pass, you can choose to fall back, just like the normal rules. But if you fail, instead of just immediately falling back and no further consequences, you remain in combat and gain the fallback token, and therefore are counted as having actually failed morale and will fall back as normal, following all the normal rules, having to rally at the end of the turn, etc. And that seems to work quite well. That seemed to work quite well in the game that we played. Need to play a couple more times really, just to see how it kind of interacts with different elements of the game, but so far so good. That just makes morale feel a little bit more impactful without being over-tuned, which is what we want. And to be fair, I think this is probably one of the first times Games Workshop really has nailed the way morale should feel and work in a game. Obviously with a few slight adjustments, but overall it seems to work really well. There's a few weapons in the game that don't quite work the way we think it should, or doesn't really seem to feel like they do what they're supposed to do. For example, a lot of the plasma guns in the game just feel horrendously underpowered compared to other options. There are a couple of slight exceptions to that rule, like the Omega Plasma Array versus the twin auto cannons on the Sakarans for the Space Marines. They do feel quite well balanced. Both options seem perfectly viable. I just realised I'm going to paint some red around these as well. So we're quite happy with those. They seem to be okay. But like the plasma blast guns on the Titans just are generally just worse than, say, the turbo laser, which is the same class of weapon. And that doesn't feel right when one weapon is clearly better than another. That shouldn't be the case, especially when there's obviously no differentiation in terms of points either. So we balance that quite easily by switching out the hit roll required to a 4 from a 3 on the blast gun, which sounds like a nerf, and it is, but that's to balance the fact that we've then given it the blast 3-inch blast template. So now you actually get a decent little blast weapon that is reasonable at multiple roles of, anti-tank and anti-infantry, but not being super efficient against either, and also obviously has that chance to scatter, which makes it again slightly less reliable in that regard, which means it then compares against the turbo laser and the Vulcan Mega Bowler, for example, for their rolls. And there's quite a few weapons on the Warhound that I feel just aren't very good, and you just never would take them because they're not very good. Certainly not compared to other options. So I will probably look at maybe modifying some of those as well. Like the Ursa's Claw, for example, is... I just don't understand why you take it. It's a 6-inch range weapon, so you've got to get really, really close to your opponent, and then it only hits on a 4-up as well. So you've got to get really close to your opponent, and then you're relying on a 50-50 chance to actually hit your target. And then you've got to do a roll-off against the target to do damage. There just seems to be so many overlapping little bits of rules there that it just becomes irrelevant. And so I'm not a fan of that one. So that's probably one that will change. And the Shock Lance, I think, is probably not quite as good as I think it should be. There's a few things. But before I continue with that is all the red done on the first Helverin. Nice and quick. So what we need to do is block in some shoulder panels there, which are going to be in black. Oh, actually, if I look at the other one, yeah, he's got a bit of red on the hood there as well, which I haven't done. So let's quickly block some red in here. Because otherwise that won't match the rest of them. There we go. While that's drying, actually, we'll quickly go back over the weapon plates here with a little bit of extra red just to really block that colour in. I do two thin coats of Mephisto red on these armour panels, just to make sure we got a nice colour on them. Just looking at where my camera is at the moment, and definitely off to one side on the screen there. This seems to be where I'm comfortable painting. So over here, so I might have to adjust the camera a little bit. If I park him there, let's see if we can move the camera in such a way where we get a bit more centered. That might work a little bit better, so we're a bit more in the centre there. You can see what I'm doing a bit better. Obviously these aren't the most high resolution cameras in the world. Sadly, we're not in a position to afford those kind of bits of hardware yet, but hopefully with time and with a little bit of investment, we'll be able to sort of improve our setups a little bit in the future and give you some much higher quality cameras to see what we're up to with greater clarity. So there we go, all the red is done. I'm quite happy with that. Will that take about half hour, if that, just to block that in? Pretty quick. So we'll be able to whip through these at a reasonable pace. So let's get some black on the model. So I'm going to swap over to some... Oh no, don't want that one. First time I did this with a Van Black, but I actually find that Black Legion, which is a contrast paint, is just covers so much better, even than Abaddon Black, which is a base paint. It should, in theory, cover a lot better, but it really doesn't. The Black Legion contrast definitely seems to be superior. So we shall run with that. Grab a dot of that. We don't need too much because we're only doing 2 little shoulder pads there. Just stick to the same brush. As we're just going to slap this on here. Happy days. Just checking the other model there quickly just to see if there's any more black to put down on any of the other panels, but I don't think so. We do just do this in one coat. We do put a little bit more paint down. As a contrast, it just flows nicely and doesn't actually need adjusting. Same on that one. Yeah, so anyway, back to what I was saying. We've got some rules changes coming to Legions, and some rules additions, new armies, hopefully new additions to armies as well. We obviously say got the Stormbird for the Astartes, and we've got plans to do other things like Breachers. I've got plans to build and convert an Imperator Titan out of predominantly plastic GW kits, but it will require a little bit of custom crafting and some 3D printing. But overall should look quite cool. And then obviously got to make some rules for it. Right, let's just quickly focus back on the old model. So armor panels are all done. Okay, and they're looking quite good. What we've got to do now is pick out some metals. So what I like to do with all of my guys, I like to keep everything as simple and easy as possible. So all I really do to do my metallic undersuits here is I basically just pick out a couple of key features or common metallic elements and just paint them in bronze, and then we'll do a couple of different washes over the different bronze areas to sort of change and shift the tones. And I also use bronze over all of the armor trim as well, but the armor trim doesn't get doesn't get an additional wash. I'm also just looking at this model, comparing it to my my first ones. There's a armor band that goes over the front there, which I actually didn't paint in bronze like I did on all of my other knights. So I might have to go back to these guys and just change them up a little bit, actually, to fit them in with the rest of the army now, because I've developed that paint job just a little bit further. So that's interesting. So what I might do is go back over some of these, because I also normally what I have done as well is the lower part of the faceplate has got black panels and I've done red there. That's interesting. So they might need a little repaint job as well, actually. But we'll come back to that, that's fine. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint that black in there to follow the rest of my army. We've got a little bit of repainting to do at some point, but I'll probably do that off camera at some point in the next week once the others are all done. Although it will annoy me, so I'll probably get these done and immediately go and fix those before I start on the last of the knights. So there we go, that's that done. I think I might even go in there and do that bronze as well, maybe, just so it carries through. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Not a big issue, we can fix that. So we're gonna bronze up, and we do like Rune Lord Brass for this, or I do anyway. It's become one of my favourite paints. thanks to my Necron army, which is primarily bronze, and I just like bronze, to be honest. I find gold to be a little bit too much, but bronze is a nice sort of alternative to silver. So I'm going to switch my paint pot. So you probably see there I've got 2 paint pots. Pretty sure I've mentioned this on another stream before, but I do have one metal and one normal, or one for metallics and one for non-metallic paints. Helps to keep everything separate. So I'm going to start off with the banding. I don't know why, I just like to get all of the armour banding done first, and then I like to move over to the bigger blocks of paint for the bronze. So I'm just going to paint up all the armour banding, and thankfully on these guys there's not loads. The tricky part though is on the feet, because they're not very well recessed, shall we say? It's the opposite of recessed, whatever the opposite of recessed is. So it's a lot harder to catch the edges. But I can do it. It's doable. It's just not very easy. And I've also got a spent shell casing on this model as well, which is going to have to be bronzed up as well. As that is the typical colour of a shell casing, is a sort of a bronzy colour. So it'll be easy to see what it is straight away. Obviously in theory it could be any colour I suppose with 40k, but our brains will be wired to recognise it immediately if it's in bronze, so why break it when that's going to work and do the same job. Now I've switched to a slightly thinner brush here as well, because as I say, these are very tight little details which are hard to reach, and they're quite thin. Now I do like to make sure that these are done in one coat, because they require quite a bit of finessing to get right. So I really would not want to go back over them with a second coat if I can help it, just to reduce the painting time. So I'm not a massive fan of painting at the best of times. I do find it a bit of a task, I have to say, but I do love the results, and I like playing on boards with fully painted armies and painted terrain. So it's a labour of love, if not one of joy. There we go. That's those little foot plates done. Just got to do the thigh plates now. These get a bit difficult as well, because I'm trying to squeeze my brush into a really narrow space. But thankfully there is just enough room to get the brush in there. And the thing is, if I really can't reach something, usually that also means that my airbrush hasn't hit it with the zenithal colour, which in this case is lead belcher. So it probably means it's already black for the primer, which obviously I whack on as much as I can and move the model around a hell of a lot rather than the zenithal approach. So it should just be in shadow, and therefore I won't bother painting it. And I do try to keep that as much as possible. If something is already black, I try not to put paint on it, so that it carries through this idea that it's part of the shadow of the model and therefore doesn't need to be painted. Okay, mainly because I'm just a lazy painter. Which is something you'll probably hear me say on probably every stream while I'm just chatting away to myself. There we go. So yeah, we've got lots of stuff on the way. New rules for Legions. I say new rules, I mean our house rulings on certain things. Some new video content on the way. So that is everything really to say in terms of what's going on with the channel for now. There is other stuff in the pipeline with some progress to be made soon. Hopefully lots of new things for the new year. So watch this space. And do remember to like, subscribe, and share on all of the platforms. But with that being said, it is, as of recording, this is a few days away from Christmas. So I think it's only right that we have a little chat, or in my case, a ramble, about what's going on over Christmas and what has been going on over the last few weeks in the lead up in terms of hobby, or the hobby, or the Warhammer hobby. So obviously we've had the Grotmas calendar, which has been dropping loads of new detachment rules and the like for Warhammer 40k, which I have to say are all looking pretty good. I've seen some interesting ones. I've seen quite a few channels already discussing how they work and whether they're any good in their opinions and whatnot. And I have to say, from what I've seen, I've quite liked the look of what I've seen. Everything does seem to be reasonably interesting. And I know some of them have been less well received than others, but I mean, when is that not the case at the end of the day? I mean, we all have different thoughts and opinions about what should be and shouldn't be, so it's hardly a surprise that not everyone's happy. But if you try to please everyone, you'll only ever please nobody. Because you just never will succeed at pleasing everybody. I think there's a lot of potential going on with some of these ones. I think some of the more interesting and controversial ones are sort of the mixed faction detachments, where you can take models from other armies. So, as I've already mentioned, the Knights and the Chaos Knights are able to sort of take infantry units, primarily I think from other factions, within their sort of remit. And I've seen some complaints about how that's going to work, or what that encourages in terms of collections, maybe. Genestealer Cult's another one. Their one was a combined force with the Tyranids, which narratively makes a lot of sense. You know, the Tyranids would eventually fight alongside the cults and vice versa during the long expanses of their development, as the cult uprises and the hordes descend. So I quite like that as a concept. I think that's really cool and really fluffy, I think the phrase is. But I do kind of see some valid points when it comes to how that's been received by some people, because it does mean that you have to have a collection from two different forces to actually run that detachment. But I personally don't see what the issue is with that. I mean, for a start, these are bonus detachments. They're not in the core book, core codex. So they are in and of themselves a bonus. So they don't need to be something you rely on. I think a lot of people will have wanted or will want the option to do these mixed force detachments. I mean, I know I would do, because I can never pick one army to stick with for a start. Hence why I always try and collect armies that have some kind of synchronicity and links to them, so that I can run mixed forces, because I just find that more appealing and interesting. But it also gives you something more interesting to aspire to, maybe, or maybe it gives you that new hobby project that you want to work on. I've just made a right pig's ear of that, so I'm grabbing a bit of water there just to water down what I've just put down and try and get rid of it by getting it soaking wet and then drying it up with the brush. And that's where the paint got a little bit too watery on my palette, and it's not following the embossed effect of the armour panel. So it was just flowing straight off of it and looking pretty horrible. But there we go, fix that, that's fine. Just a fresh bit of paint on the palette. There we go. Again, I'm not too worried about these being absolutely pristine and perfect. I do want them to be nice, obviously. But I certainly won't be going to the effort of edge highlighting them, that's for sure. I've seen some great videos of people painting these 8mm scale models, and they go through and highlight all of the models and the panels, particularly on the vehicles as well. The people who go ahead and highlight their infantry are, whew, that's just another level of commitment. Which I admire. I very much admire people who are not only talented enough to, but also willing to take that level of time and care into those tiny little 8mm infantry models, but it's just not for me, and personally I don't really feel it's worth it. Not this scale anyway. I mean, I don't even do it on my 28mm scale models, so the likelihood of me ever edge highlighting an 8mm scale model is, well, not quite zero, I suppose, because, you know, things may change one day, I suppose, but as close to zero as they could be. What you might call a non-zero chance, but still pretty close to zero. Okay, so that's all the, well, almost all the arm panels done. It's almost all the ones. It's all the ones I'm going to paint with that brush. I'm going to start doing the last couple of panels with this brush. It's slightly bigger, and I don't need to be quite so neat with these ones because they're a bit bigger. That's just the big banding on the front and back of the carapace, which again is on the front part of the carapace. I didn't do on the first set, but to be fair, they were my test models for this paint scheme, so it makes sense that I evolved it slightly as I went on. Does just mean I've got to go back and redo a couple of little bits on those first armigers, which won't take long. It's just the process of going back, repainting some bits, rewashing some bits, and then obviously revarnishing them to protect the new paintwork, because I do insist on varnishing all my models, and normally 3 coats of varnish as well, because I really like to make sure that those jobs are protected as best they can be from general wear and tear, especially as, although I don't put probably as much effort in as some people will to their models, I certainly put enough time and effort into them that I wouldn't want to have to redo that in any way. So there we go, that's most of the way there. So it's now going through and finding those bits I want to pick out. Now I always do pistons, don't know why, it's just a feature I like. So, and these armigers have two very prominent pistons on their legs. I'll just pick those out. Okay, we're just gliding the brush on to catch those points of interest. There we go. I'll do the other leg. And it's amazing how just doing a tiny little bit of extra or different metal colours without actually necessarily going in and painting every single detail in a different individual colour still makes a massive effect. Just changing a couple of little key elements just to sell the idea, and it's very easy then for your eye to just do the rest for you, really. So we'll paint in these little nodules at the back of the legs. No idea what they're supposed to be. Not even sure if everything on the model is supposed to have a job or not, or whether they just think, oh, that'll look cool, we'll whack that on. Which I imagine is probably quite a lot of it, considering so many of these models have random cables hanging off them and whatnot, which, if they are functional cables that are forming part of the main function of the vehicles, it's probably not a good idea to have them just hanging loose on the outside of armour panels. That really doesn't make a lot of sense. Ooh. But you see it a lot on big vehicle models in 40k. They seem to just have cables everywhere, which, you know, does add some visual variety and an excuse to paint something a different colour. But logically, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, all these knights have big, massive cables just hanging off them for seemingly no reason. So I'll paint those bits. If I quickly check this guy's back, I think we painted in that round circular bit there and that cylinder as well. Top of the vents, just inside the carapace, there's like this little round nodule which has 3 divots in it. In every model I've done so far, I've painted those in bronze, so that's going to get done, as well as the barrel of the melter on the top. So, yeah, that's going to be fine. God, I'm dropping this a lot. As you can already tell by the fact that I've got these gloves on, my hands are not the best in the world. There we go, and also there. I think this is meant to be some kind of reactor core plate or something like that. I'm sure I've seen someone reference that somewhere. Might have been Eons of Battle I'm pulling that from. Don't know where he got that information from, but it is what it is. That's what I've heard, so that's what I'm going with. There's that little round nodule in there. We'll paint that. One on the other side. There we go. Okay, we'll just carry on up the body for a minute before I go back to the guns. And we'll just paint in these vents here. So these exhaust vents are a good example of where I'm putting the bronze colour here that is the exact same as the banding. But what I'm going to do is, once this has had the all over non-oil wash, I will then go back over things like these smokestacks or exhaust vents and actually put a contrast paint over the top as well, which will help differentiate the different bronzy colours from the rest of the model. Just paint in that thermal weapon there. There we go. Right, so that's almost all the bronze work done already, and I'm just going to look at those guns. I don't think I'm going to do too much with the guns. I do like to do the sort of end caps on these sort of weapons in bronze as well, so we'll do that here as well, just so that there's a little bit of variety on the weapon. There we go. Don't need to worry about in there because that's going to be very much in shadow. So that's a classic case of it's all black in there, there's no silver really, so I can't see it. My brush won't get to it easily. It's already black, so it's in shadow. And pretty much the same with the inside there as well. My brush ain't going to get in there very easily, so I won't worry too much about trying to get in there. There we go. I think that is all the bronze done. Yep, I'm quite happy with that. That's all bronzed up. Oh, actually, I say it's all done. It's got that shell on the bottom of the base there, look. I said I was going to do that in bronze. So let's just load my brush up with what's left on the palette there. And just do a quick dirty coat over the top. Now this I really don't mind whether it's not a perfect colour, because it's a discarded shell case. It probably has got a bit scuffed and nasty, and once the wash goes on it'll all blend together nicely. So, but to be fair, this paint does tend to cover quite well, so I'm generally not having to worry about that kind of thing anyway. There we go. Right, he's done and ready to wash. I say done, I mean he's done to the point of washing. Once the wash goes on, I have to say these things become extraordinarily quick to paint after that, once the wash is down, because it pretty much completes the vast majority of the model. So after the wash goes down, all I'll do then is go in and pick out all the cables in grace here, so that I can then contrast a blue over the top, so that they've got some blue cables, a bit of storm silver in the eyes there, to then have the same blue go over the top, for then a green to go over the top for the eye glow, and then just popping on the extra colours to darken down or change the tones of the bronze on the chassis or the superstructure. I've dropped it again. Which is going to be primarily rattling grime, and then sometimes on the weapon casings and stuff I will use basilicanum grey, just to again differentiate again. But in this case the basilicanum grey is only going to go on the tip of the melter gun there. The rest of it will just be rattling. Yeah, so these guys are going to be done pretty damn quickly, which is nice. One thing I will do as well, once all that is done as well, I'll pop these down onto some metal trays for my my magnets to sit into, that will clip on, and I'll go with a big brush and just sort of paint on some black around the rims here, That will then get one coat of varnish. Then I'll go in and put my texture onto the base, which is a Geek Gaming Scenics Urban Rubble base ready, and seal that all down with some PVA, and then they'll get a final 2 coats of varnish as well. And I do like matte varnish, just because I like the effect of a matte varnish. I like to take the sheen out of the model. Which is just my preferred method. And then I will go with some hard coat, which is the gloss varnish from Citadel, just into the eyes to help them have that more glow effect. Right, well, I reckon I can carry on and chuck that wash on, as these paints tone to dry quick enough. Now a bit of Nuln Oil. This is the new Nuln Oil from when GW changed the recipe for their Nuln Oil, and I have to say I quite like it. I know some people don't. I do have a pot or half a tube left of the older stuff, but this doesn't seem to stain the surfaces so much, which I prefer, actually. If I really want to stain a surface, I'll use Basilicon and Grey. Leave the top off that one because I'll come back to it pretty soon. And we've got our wash brush here. So yeah, I'm pretty much only going to use these 3 brushes on these guys. I'm not really going to be using any other brush, I don't think. Oh, oh dear, that's run into the water. I think my wet palette's a little bit too wet. Just pop it over here. Bit better. Right, and we're just going to slap this all over. And this will just catch all those recesses, lovely. I say catch, flow into all of those recesses. And it will stain some of the model a little bit, but this stuff seems to just have a magic effect on bronze, rune or brass, that I absolutely love. It just gives it a really nice colour. Takes away something that in the brune or brass that changes its colour. And it also does a fantastic job on that Mephiston red as well. Really brings it to life. There we go. The only thing is just to try and make sure it doesn't pull too much in some places. That's the real key, really. I like it to pull in some places, particularly in certain recesses and whatnot. I like it to be a little bit thicker, because that helps to sell the sort of grime aesthetic. I don't like these guys to be... I don't like them to look like they're parade standard and all been washed up and ready to parade around the homeworld, as it were, but I do like them to have a little bit of a battle in progress look to it, or maybe they've been on campaign and they've been sort of washed and prepared to a certain degree, particularly with something like the Knights, which do like to be prim and proper. But it's still very much like a field look. They are still suffering the effects of the environment to a certain degree. So they're not super clean. Let's just get that as well. And there we go. That is it. And to be honest, that is probably about 90% done at that point. It's still got the wash on. Obviously, that's going to take a little while to dry. He's going to take quite a little while to dry, so at that point we'd move on to the next one and start painting him up, going through all the same stages. As you can see, this little process is not too bad. It's quite quick. And obviously I've been chatting away and not really concentrating solely on painting. I can bash these out pretty quick. So obviously some of these models do take a little longer. So some of the other knights got larger armor panels and more metallic areas that need more attention. So they're not all as quick as that, but they are still reasonably quick. I mean, I complete most of them in. I could probably complete most of it in a day, within reason. You know, six Questoris Knights in one go was quite a lot. That probably should have been 3, and I would have done them a bit quicker. And the Cerastus Knights again, 2 is probably the efficient way of painting them. Pythurian's okay in 2s. Again, I probably be a little bit more efficient. No, 2 is probably the right number, because you always want to do at least 2, because then when one is being washed, you move on to the next one. You wash that, then move to the first one, and do the next stage on it. I'm going to quickly check this guy and see how his glued arm's doing. It's still a little bit dodgy. Definitely might be a resin seal job on that one. To be a pain, but might be alright. Might be alright. Just gotta be a little bit careful. Try not to drop them again. Right, so let's carry on with the next one then. Let's grab another Armiger and crack on with some red. So I'm going to need a bit more red on my palette, I think, because this red is going to be really watered down now, I think, but we'll give it a go, see what it's like. Because the wet palette does sort of bleed into the paint a little bit. Might get away with it here. It is looking a bit thin. You don't want it too thin, because otherwise you're just not going to get any coverage out of it whatsoever. And if there's no viscosity to it whatsoever, it's just going to flow off the model rather than where it should be. See, that I cannot seem to hold on to these models today. It might be to this plaster on my thumb, whether it's preventing me from understanding where my finger is. The only reason I've really got it on is because I've got a bit of a, well, to be honest, I almost cut through the entire top of my thumb at work this week. So there is a bit of a unsightly appearance to it. So I'm covering it up more for your benefit than mine. And you get to see me with a very lovely unicorn plaster on, so you know. I'm sure you can enjoy that part of the experience. So I feel like I've got myself sidetracked here, because I was talking about Grotmust attachments and stuff like that. We were talking about the fact that some of these new detachments require potentially multiple armies, but I don't feel like that's a bad thing, because, you know, some of us like that. A lot of us probably have wanted to do that but had very little incentive. And then some people are going to be in the camp of, well, in order to run that now, I've got to, you know, own 2 armies, I suppose, or 2 halves of 2 armies. or a half of 2 armies, if that makes sense. Which I just think I like the fact that it exists. I like the fact that that option exists. I don't think that should be a bad thing. Does it need to be hyper competitive? No, absolutely not. In fact, it probably shouldn't be. I'd be quite happy if they released detachments that were only allowed to be used in narrative games. If that's the case, I'd be absolutely fine with that. And obviously, narrative they tend to push as Crusade, which, to be fair, we used to run a lot of Crusade. Myself and my normal play group. During 8th and 9th, well, I mean tail end of 8th, but 9th, we used to do a lot of it. In fact, that was pretty much the only way we played 40k. But since 10th edition's come out, we really haven't got into Crusade at all. But it's hard to say why, really. I don't really know why we haven't. It's just kind of fallen off at the moment, but I think a lot of that might be to do with, a lot of changes have been going on with our group, and the way that we do things. And early this year we discovered, I discovered the love for 8mm gaming. Zeta was already kind of in there already and was already interested, but as soon as I caught onto it, that was it. I was in. I immediately went out and spent about £200 on starter boxes, and got straight in and started having a go, and haven't looked back since, I have to say. Much to the detriment, I suppose, of my 40k gaming. Really, I played a handful of games. And that's it, really. I haven't played many games of 10th because I'm very much in this field of 8mm gaming now. That's not to say I won't be going back to it. I obviously will be going back to it. It's 40k. You kind of got to be in there to some degree. But at the moment, it's just not pulling me in at the moment. It certainly doesn't make me want to go out and paint any models at the moment. Like I said, I think the only models I'm really interested in painting at the moment would be a knight, maybe. But I also don't want to go and splash out £100 on a knight right now. Especially as I've got other projects that I want to keep expanding. I've got quite a sizable army of legions now. And by sizable, I mean huge. I mean, I have 3 entire armies. I have an entire Knight army, an entire Solar Auxiliary army, and an entire Titan army, and most of a Space Marine army. So I can effectively run. I can very efficiently run 3 armies, and potentially a 4th. I will probably have to expand my Space Marine army a little bit just to actually get it up to 3,000 points. It's currently set at 2, which isn't bad. And it probably will go up a bit more once I've written some extra rules for some special units I've already made. But I don't know that it will be another 1,000 points. In fact, I can almost guarantee it won't be. So I would have to add some stuff to it. So I probably will go back and bring it up to 3,000 points just to finish it off. But I'm very much focused on Auxiliary Knights and Titans these days. The Auxiliary for making the game a bit more interesting, giving me some more options, and the Knights and the Titans because that's what I enjoy. That's what I enjoy painting for the first time, I think, ever. It's the only things I've ever enjoyed painting. And also because they are just, not to use a terrible pun here, but epic to run and play. So my Auxiliary are there very much as a needs must So I very, very, very purposely picked or made myself a paint scheme that is as easy as possible to replicate quickly, because I do not want to be sat around painting loads of them. I want loads of them because I need a big force of auxilia to act as the primary force, really. Because they're going to be the ones that come in the vast numbers in the narratives, whereas the Knights and the Titans will be much more specialist. So I do need a horde. So I very much planned ahead for that and actually made sure I designed a scheme that would actually accommodate my lack of interest in painting those kind of models by making it as easy as possible and as quick as possible to do. And I think I've achieved that. I'm able to paint pretty much an entire infantry box in an evening, or maybe a couple of evenings. Probably a couple of evenings. Probably takes an evening or two, or I could probably bash them out in a day if I have a whole day. And the tanks, well, I can smash the tanks out really fast. I painted up an entire unit of 8 Leman Russes effectively in a single evening after work. In fairness, I mean, they were pre-primed and zenithalled, I will admit, but yes, I was able to come home from work to those zenithalled models and paint them before I went to bed. To completion. Bases take a bit longer because of drying times with PVA, but that's neither here nor there because that's not effort really. That's just waiting where I could be doing other stuff. So having said that, I've still got those basilisks there that I sort of got started on the stream a few weeks ago, because I hadn't quite figured out at the time that how painting these up would actually mean that I would be painting them in such a nice flow I wouldn't actually stop, whereas I kind of thought initially that I might end up having to stop, so I needed another project on the side to carry on with while on stream, but actually I don't. So I need to go over and actually finish those. So I might finish those up soon, but I do want to get the rest of my knights done up. Having said that, I might finish these armigers up and repaint the bits on the other ones, because I probably haven't got. I don't know that I'll be running the other Pytherions yet anyway, so I might switch over and paint up and finish up those basilisks before continuing with the Pytherions. Yeah, it's possibly what I'll do. Right, done the first coat of that already, so we're on to the second one. And again, one thing I like about this method is once I've finished all the red on the first pass, I can start from the beginning and put the second pass on. And I do quite enjoy painting like this because it means you're painting a different colour semi-regularly, just doing one model at a time. Which again is one reason I like painting these, because there's no downtime really, you just keep carrying on. I'm going to be trying that on the basilisks as well, because they've got another all-over wash stage to do as well. So it might be a case of doing something similar, just to keep it interesting. Colour on these nice and quick. Very cool. I have to say, painting these up, I have a funny feeling I'm going to go ahead and finish the Pytherions next, as much as I want to get those basilisks finished up, because I know I've got a fair bit of Solar Auxilia coming at Christmas. One thing I have thought as well, because I know I've got some planes coming as well, which are some Avenger Strike Fighters and some is it Aquila Landers? Which means I'm going to be able to run an army that I very much really want to run with my Auxilia, which is almost like a Starship Trooper style. All the infantry coming down in drop ships, which will look very cool for me. Whether that's good in game or not, no idea. Don't really care. It's cool. It's Starship Troopers in Warhammer. I'm done. So I was looking into how I was going to paint them, because obviously I've got as I've already said, I've kind of established a paint scheme for my Solar Auxilia that was designed to be very quick and easy to do. But then I read that, I started looking into the lore and stuff a little bit more, and realised that those sort of aircraft are actually part of the Aeronautica Imperialis rather than the Solar Auxilia. So in theory, they should be painted differently. Which I haven't denied about for a little bit. And then I thought, well, I can still apply the same principles of what I've done with the Auxilia tanks and just change the colours, so that I can still paint them really quickly. So I'll just use the exact same methodology, just different colours, to achieve the exact same effect. So I've decided that I will be doing my aircraft as Aeronautica Imperialis, but my own sort of take on it, shall we say, so that they will have a distinct colour. So I will actually, when I put my armies on the table, I will have sort of 4 distinct colour schemes combined together. 5 if I also run the Alpha Legion alongside them as well. Then I would have I would have 5 different armies essentially represented, or departments, or whatever you might want to call it, however it's referenced, to represent 5 different sections of the combined arms force, which I really like. I know some people would prefer to have sort of a unified scheme, which, you know, that's fair. You want all your Titans and your Knights and your Space Marines and your Auxilia to all match, which, you know, is great. That's cool. It makes them very obviously a cohesive army. But I very much like the idea of them being distinct armies that work together, so they need to be different. And I like them to complement each other to a certain degree. So we've very much got a different style at all phases, because not only does that mean that I can play around with some different colours and make things a bit more interesting for myself to paint, but it also lends itself to being able to actually run the armies against each other as well, because then it's very easy to see them on the battlefield. So if I know, for example, I'm going to be playing a game and I need to lend someone an army to teach them how to play the game, or, you know, they've only got so many points, so I could lend them, you know, a force multiplier, such as, you know, I can run my Auxilia and my Knights, and I can lend someone some Titans just to fill out their points. I can do that, because then it's very obvious that these are my units, those are your units. Or I can just run 2 of my armies against each other, or split them down the middle. Well, actually, I can't split them down the middle to a point, because as I say, I've still got the Alpha Legion as well. But it won't work quite so efficiently because I'm not really building up too many of the Alpha Legion. For no other reason than the narrative for my army is very much focused on the knights, and therefore the auxilia kind of fit with the knights a bit better in terms of the narrative than the Alpha Legion does. So that's what I go for. I've just realised another part of this these knights that could be painted differently to the way I've done it, based on the way I've painted all my other knights, because they've got these hatches in the top with windows, which on all my other knights I've done as black, but they've always been inset into a part of the armour I've left silver, whereas their hatches basically form part of the main structure of the carapace. So actually I'm reasonably happy just to keep them red, because they're part of the main body rather than the others, which are a little bit more segmented or sectioned off. So that's fine. I'm not going to go in and repaint all that. Not least because it would actually be quite a pain to do. And I also very purposely paint my these guys slightly differently to the rest anyway, because they are thematically, I think of them more as literally like the hunting hounds of the knights, which, you know, leans into the idea where they're Chaos Knights obviously get their war dogs from. I kind of lean into that even for my sort of kind of loyalist knights, that they actually they treat their knights as warhounds as well, war dogs. So they are. So I kind of narratively, I'm thinking of them as maybe sort of borrowing an idea from like the Night's Watch from Game of Thrones or something, where high class criminals or even criminal nobles are sort of forced into piloting these Armiger suits as punishment, and if they perform well and they survive, they maybe get re-inducted or released from service as war dogs and can either return to their knights, or, you know, if they're just part of the nobility, the sort of, not the high nobility, but, you know, the lower nobility, maybe they can return to whatever service they were previously a part of, which could have been, well, anything from the home world really, or return to service in the Solar Auxilia maybe, or my version of the Solar Auxilia, the Etherian Auxilia, as they are from the planet of Etherian, which is also where House Dracaran come from. And unlike a lot of night houses, House Dracaran's not like a typical feudal world. It is still feudalistic, but it's more industrialised. So it's more like, I suppose it would be more like steampunk feudal society almost, where they've definitely adopted technologies and they have hive cities, but they still host some more lush elements to their world. They haven't overextended. The night houses and the nobility still like to have their nicer landscapes to roam around and farmlands to supply themselves with. They're quite self-sufficient. They're very self-sufficient. But they still have sort of big forge worlds as well, where they industrialise in certain areas of the planet, which is where the Etherian Auxilia hail from, basically, is these big hive cities where they mass produce weapons of war. and local in the system as well, is the planet where the Titans come from, who are the close allies of House Dracaran. So, and that world basically doesn't have like it has a Mechanicus presence, obviously, because they maintain all the Titans and obviously offer their services in preparing and looking after the Knight suits, but they don't actually have like their own Skitarii forces. They're quite limited in that regard, so they rely on House Dracaran to provide them with military support. So that's why their hive worlds have got access to arms and armour that maybe most household retainers and stuff wouldn't usually have access to. So they do have a full fleet of armour, tanks, as well as air assets. So they have their own Imperialis, Nautica Imperialis, which is well maintained by the Forge World. And then the Titan's homeworld is actually supplied with military assets from Etherion's Auxiliars, and they actually provide mortal defence forces for both their homeworld but also the Forge World. And the Forge World is host to it's a large enough Forge World to support the production of Titans, as well as obviously maintaining the god engines that they already have. So we've got quite a nice little narrative building there. And then there are some hints in the Auxilia that there's definitely an Alpha Legion presence or influence going on there. They do have some sort of green stripe motifs, and some of their not nobles, but the higher echelons do tend to sort of sport this typical Achillean green motifs, because there has definitely been a few occasions where the Alpha Legion has actually worked alongside House Dracaran and their allies, and equally they've also fought against them many times because, Alpha Legion. So there's definitely an interweaving there of the two. There's House Dracaran is not above a little bit of subterfuge and backhanded deals and stuff like that, so they do get on with the Alpha Legion on occasion. They don't trust each other, obviously. Why would you? But they have been known to work together. That's just my own narrative excuse for me to be able to still have a force of Alpha Legion that can kind of mix in and join House Dracaran on occasion, or any of the others. But also gives me a good excuse to have them as an opponent as well. They do occasionally come to blows. And I do like the sort of subterfuge elements and a bit of espionage and political manoeuvring side of things, which is why I wanted to mix that in a little bit to the Night House as well, which is actually surprisingly easy to do, thanks to the sort of almost Game of Thrones-esque nature you can apply to the Night Houses. So although they're big, stompy robots and, a bit crazy and fun to run around, you can sort of have this sort of narrative background which is much more nuanced. Makes it interesting. So I'm playing with an idea of sort of developing the background and lore for this Night House, where they're sort of quite Machiavellian in some ways, particularly their leader, the High King, or whatever title I decide to go for. There's a bit of an element of that kind of nature to it, so it's going to make them a little bit more interesting and in-depth. which is always fun, for me anyway. So I will want to probably bring these to life at 28mm scale at some point as well. Probably very slowly over the next year. I definitely know I'm going to sort of sort out my Alpha Legion side of it, so I can sort of bring those to 40k when I get a chance. I do know a couple of people that don't play Legion, so I do play 40k with them. So there will be an excuse to do it at some point in the nearish future. But one thing I do know, particularly for when I'm doing the narrative stuff for the channel, I do want some 28mm figures to sort of show off for close-ups and whatnot. So I will need to get a couple of auxiliary units, which I'll probably modify a little bit to suit my own style. But I was thinking about ways of representing the Knight Scions, and I've got an idea of using I think it's the subductor squads as the base. I'll buy a box of those, and that'll give me enough to make 10, of which I won't need 10 for a while, I would have thought, but with a few 3D printed assets and some extra modifications. Their armour seems like a nice, almost medieval style armour, but a bit more techy, which feels like it would suit perfectly for a Knight Scion outside of their suit. Just with a few modifications would work quite well, I think. So I will probably pick up a box of those at some point and convert up a Scion or two. Need some auxiliary troops to represent those things as well, and of course I will need a full-size knight, I suppose, at some point. I'm sure there will be cause for that, so I'll be able to do some interesting things. So we've got plenty of things to work on. At the moment I need to finish off my armies to get all my terrain painted up. It shouldn't take too long, realistically. Well, I say that, I mean, I know I've got a lot of models coming soon. So yeah, a couple of conversions that I'll be working on at some point, and I will probably paint those up on stream, to be honest. Once I've got the bulk of this done, in fact by next weekend I would have thought. Well, I don't know, actually depends how quick I paint some of the stuff up. So I've got a lot of Legion stuff I really want to get done and painted up before the new year if I can. So there probably will be one more stream of specifically Legions painting, which will be very much focused on getting these units all done. And then I should be working on a lot of terrain projects during the week, I would have thought. But then after that, I should probably be working on streaming, painting up some different stuff, probably 28mm scale stuff, to be honest, because it'll probably also be easier to actually show off as well. And that will primarily focus on, you know, these sort of close-up projects that I want to do for channel stories, but also some actual units as well that I will probably run in games as well. So there will be a bit of a mix of things coming in the near future, and there will be Legions projects as well, I'm sure, that I'll paint on stream. But it will depend, obviously, what people are interested in. If people are more interested in me painting Legion stuff on stream, then that's what I'll do. But we'll mix it up and see what works, see what everyone's interested in, and we'll go from there. Really, it's very much a fluid process for me. I can kind of flex into whatever needs doing at the time and what everyone wants to see. I'm not particularly convicted in any particular way of doing things, so we'll go with the flow, as it were. But at the moment these projects have got sort of deadlines to work to, as I want to have a full 3,000 points of each of these fully painted as a guarantee, so that I've got stuff to run on the table, and anything else after that will just be a bonus or for personal hobby time. Which does mean I've got quite a bit of Solar Auxilia to smash through once those Christmas boxes arrive, because I already know what they all are. Not going to lie, it's because I bought them. And I think I've got to wrap my own presents and deliver them to myself on Christmas Day, but that's not unusual in my family, especially as it's very much we sort of have, certainly I have the guiding principle that I might as well get what I want rather than you not trying to guess what I want. So I'll just get it, you pay for it, and then we'll call it quits. That's just the way I view things. I'm very much, I might as well get what I want rather than messing around with giving you options of things I might want, but realistically there's going to be something I do want, blah 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 blah. I would just skip out that phase of things and just do what you want to do at the end of the day. If someone's only buying me a token present or something like that, then that is easy, because I will just send a list of things that are things that I'd like but I wouldn't buy myself, because those are always great for token presents. The things that you do want but you don't want to spend your money on are great for things like that. That would be my opinion anyway. But then if someone's buying you a proper present and they're spending decent money, then you might as well make sure they actually get the thing you actually want. And in my case, because most of the people who buy stuff for me don't tend to be wargamers, particularly my mum and my brother and whatnot, it is just easier for me to buy it myself. That just saves any guesswork. Oh. Something pinged, but I'm not sure what or why. It almost sounded like a church bell, but it definitely wasn't. We've almost got the next round of bronze done on this one. So You know what, we could have a unit of 3 90% painted by the end of this stream, which would be quite good. That works out at just about an hour per model, which isn't too bad. I'm probably very slow at painting, to be honest. I've seen a few things online of someone saying, "Oh, is painting X model for an hour too long?" And people laughing, saying, "Yeah, no, you're mad for spending that long on that model." And I'm sat there thinking, I'll probably spend 2 or 3 hours for a similar model. And that might be one of the reasons why I don't enjoy it so much, I suppose, is because it just takes so long to get anywhere. But I'm just not a quick painter, I don't think. So I do try and find ways of making life easier for myself. I definitely think one way of making life easier for myself is these big old robots, because, well, they paint up relatively quickly, and certainly very quickly when you consider how many points they're worth. Now, basically this is going to be 180 points that's only going to have taken about 3 hours to do. Which, in terms of 40k, I mean, if I was trying to paint up 180 points of 40k in 3 hours, I don't even know what on earth I could paint for 3 hours that would only take me that long. Even a basic infantry squad seems to take me an entire week. But then again, that just might be the way I was painting at the time. Maybe I'll be a bit quicker now, I don't know. Because I have spent a lot of time at the painting desk recently, so I might have picked up a bit of speed. Right, so the only thing left to do then is the back of those and the big old shell on the base. And then this one is ready for washing. Now I promise not all of these have got shells on the base, some of them have got other things. It just so happens that the first two I picked up had shells on the base. I like to add at least one feature to each base, just to give it something to, I don't know, just to add a little bit of subtle narrative. I mean, there's no narrative to it really at all, it's just there, but it just helps to break up the base, make them look a bit more interesting. In 40k, if I've got like characters and stuff, I do like to go all out and make almost like mini dioramas on the base, because it's just fun. I haven't really done that with Legion scale stuff at the moment. Well, I have to a certain degree. I mean, some of the HQ units do look a little bit snazzier, I suppose, but it's very subtle compared to what I'd normally do. Right, I'm just going to quickly double check I'm not forgetting anything for the bronzing, but I think we're good to go on the wash for that one. I'm just going to give it a minute or so just to let the paint dry a little bit on those metallics. I'm just going to take a quick 5 minute. Oh, stop for a second. Keep yourself hydrated a little bit. I'm doing a lot of talking, dries your mouth out. So let's just take a little pit stop to review what we look like so far. Got a little bit of sheet here. I don't know if that's going to help with focus. That does seem to help a little bit. There you go, look, little armiger there. His wash is almost completely dry, I think. You see just a little bit of work, picking out a few different bits for the metals, just gives it a little bit of visual interest without really doing any real work, really. Obviously, I'm going to wash them over again as well, just to make them stand out from the armour trim. But that is it, really. That is the model pretty much done, to be honest. There's not much else that's going to be happening to that now, so you won't really be missing much. But it looks quite cool. I like it. Looks cool. A little bit of foam board, if you were wondering. So yeah, you can compare him to this other one at the moment. Now obviously this one's looking a bit shiny because he's just had a wash on him. The other one's had a matte varnish on, so he's looking a bit shinier. But he'll dull down quite a bit once I put the matte varnish on. Yeah, definitely have to go back on this guy and put the black plates on the face and put the bronze on the plate there. That won't take very long at all. We can fix those up really quickly. So that'll be fine. Yeah, it's all looking good. I'm liking it. Right. Actually been long enough. We can pop along to the wash stage on number 2. So my goal will be, hopefully, to maybe get these 9 done today, or at least mostly done today, so that way tomorrow I can get the Pytherions at least started. Don't know if I'll get them finished tomorrow. Probably won't actually, because I've got to do a bit of work tomorrow. Go to work, that is, rather than just do work. So I might not quite achieve my goal of getting all of my knights painted before Christmas. But I'll get pretty close. I think I'll get pretty damn close. It just depends how the next couple of days go in terms of speed and timing, I think. So it doesn't help that I've got to go back in and repaint a little bit of these little knights on the other set. That will make things a little bit delayed. But then I suppose if I hold off repainting those bits until later, I can probably count that as being done. A little bit of a cheat, really, and it'll annoy me. It will definitely annoy me, so I will have to go and repaint that. I just might see if I can hold off that until I've at least got the Pytherions done, and then go back in and fix the models that aren't quite right. It just depends whether I've got that level of self-control. We'll see. I'm not making any promises, because I know what I'm like. Once I see something's an issue, I want to fix it. It's just the way I am. I just like making it. I just like fixing it. Not necessarily a bad thing, I suppose. But it might cause a delay, so we'll see. Because in theory, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a little bit inconsistent. You'll also notice I haven't, so on the knights I showed at the beginning, they do actually have some personal heraldry and stuff. Well, like I said about the sort of my idea for the sort of lore of the way the Armigers are working for my House Dracaran is that they are, you know, the almost like sisters penitent engines, if you like, to use a 40k term, or the Night's Watch from Game of Thrones. They are very much, they're not an honourable tool of war, they are, or an honourable warrior. They are literally just a tool of war with someone who is repenting their sins, so to speak, or taking up the Helm Mechanicus to atone for their sins, as it were. But unlike, say, the Night's Watch or the Penitent Engines, they can be redeemed. They're not quite so one and done. There is redemption. There is both redemption in death and redemption in success. They are a bit more meritocratic than you might think. But obviously, generally speaking, they are used like hounds of war, so they're not really given tasks where you'd necessarily expect them to survive, so the probability of survival is going to be pretty low. But there is a chance, and some knights, lesser scions, and aristocratic members of society on Ethereum will probably choose to take up the Helm Mechanicum simply for the opportunity to survive, where they probably would be just summarily executed for their crimes. They might be given this as an option to avoid that fate. So, yeah, it all works out in the end. But I have to say, I'm loving the look for my Night House. I was umming and ahhing about it, but now I've seen a few different models done up. I am quite happy with it. House Dracaran. Bonus points if you get the reference. I'm sure it's pretty easy for those of you in the know. Right, let's move on. Let's see if we can get a third one done. And hopefully washed before the stream ends. That'll be one every hour, give or take. I mean, actually, if I get another one done now, that'll be about 45 minutes. So let's concentrate on getting this done. Let's see if we can do it. Speed running Legions Armigers. Or Armigers. Is it Armiger or Armigers? But me and Zeta had this conversation earlier, and we're not really sure what the correct pronunciation is. And you certainly seem to hear both at various points from various people. I need to check one of the Warhammer TV battle reports where they've used knights and just listen out for when they refer to it, see if I can get a semi-official pronunciation. Actually, I think there might be a Lawmaster episode on Warhammer TV that goes into knights. I might whack that on once the stream is over, when I'm painting up some more of these later, and see if I can ascertain the correct answer. I'm just thinking about this as well. If it is roughly an hour per model, now I've got another 6 to do after this. I'd have to start by 6 o'clock to ensure I got finished by by midnight. And they still wouldn't technically be finished, that's just, they'd be at the 90% mark. I would be able to finish them very quickly tomorrow at that point though. And I've also got their little tokens to do as well. Order tokens and wound markers, or wound tokens as well, which I like to paint up before the next project, so that they've always got their tokens ready to go once they're painted. I've got to get a load of bases ready for all the new models as well. I know I want to get all my flyers painted up ASAP, because they're going to form the backbone of my my army plans. I'm currently sort of deciding on a 3,000 point list to run. I want to include the War Master, but the War Master's so many points. 750 points. It's an absolute monster. It's a monster of a machine. And it's great fun to use. But is very expensive. A 3,000 point game, it is nearly a third of your points just to run one model. It's so many points. For a 4,000 point game, it's less than a quarter. That's probably okay. 5,000 point game, no brainer for me. No brainer. 3,000 points though, it does feel like a hell of an investment. And to be fair, I mean, it's a good investment because that thing does not die easy. Whew, no, it doesn't. Not when it's supported properly as well. It's monstrous, to say the least. But then the caveat is that you just don't have a lot of points to put elsewhere. So, and I do like my Titans. So I like to run. Well, I'd like to run some Titans in my 3,000 point list because I want all elements of my army represented. For most games, anyway. Not every game, obviously. Some games I'll run some funky skew lists where I'll just run entirely Knights or entirely Titans or my Solar Auxilia completely on their own, with or without the forces of the Aeronautica Imperialis. You know, just to vary things up. You want a bit of fun. But there's definitely a temptation to, for like a standard list, I want to sort of be able to mix in, or soup in, shall we say, to use an old term, for 40k, the different elements of the armies. A combined arms force. Now, a true combined arms force featuring all three, arguably four, facets of my army at 3,000 points isn't the easiest in the world, because you are sacrificing quite a lot to get all three represented. So I've tried a version of the list that has the War Master in, and you sacrifice. I essentially have to sacrifice a lot of knight power to do it, or a lot of auxilia power to do it. It feels rough when looking at the list composition. It lacks that special sauce. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to handle that yet. Possibly go down to just running a couple of Warhounds at 3,000 points, which kind of feels alright, really, because 3,000 points really is, in terms of Legion scale, 3,000 points really is like a minor battle. And it is like it does feel like a minor battle in scope. You know, in scope it's obviously colossal in comparison to 40k. Even 3,000 point games or even 5,000 point games of 40k, that's still a 3,000 point games of Legions is still significantly larger in scope than even those. But in terms of Legions, I do feel like 3,000 points, when you consider what units you tend to get on the board, especially if you're sort of bringing Knights and Titans, you don't bring masses. Still bring really cool massive troops, obviously. If you're just running Solar Auxilia or Astartes, you do get quite a lot of models on the table, in fairness. But I think in Legions, you really do want those big power punchers. And I think that's where you could easily justify running a 5,000 point game or a 6,000 point game, because you're not piling on dozens and dozens and dozens of tiny little units necessarily, but you are bringing in some really big hard hitters as part of that force, and it does make it quite interesting. I think a 6,000 point game, based on the way we're kind of running the distribution of points, is probably what I would probably consider sort of the top end of playable in a day. I would think 6,000 points, because the way we basically run it is that instead of using the 70% rule for allies, Instead, it's 60% if you're just so your primary army is still the majority of the army, so it's 60%, 40%. Just so you've got a little bit more wiggle room, because 70% really doesn't leave much wiggle room. But if you're running more than 2 allied contingents or allied armies, so in my case I'd be running Auxilia, Titans and Knights, then you can actually do, your primary army has to be 50%, so it's still the majority, but then the other 2 break up the other 50, so it still feels very much like, well, clearly that is bringing the most points. Your primary army is still the most value. And that seems to work. So with that in mind, a full-scale force using sort of the idea that your secondary armies are going to be these bigger, heavy-pointed forces, a 6,000 point gain is going to be, you know, your 50% for me would be the Solar Auxilia, so that's still going to be a hefty game with lots of models and vehicles and stuff like that running around. But then that other 3,000 points is going to be made up of Titans and Knight formations, so it's not going to feel like you've got, you know, hundreds of units running around, making the game unwieldy to play. In principle, I haven't actually tried that yet, mainly because I'm the only person that currently could field an army of that scale. But I think it will work quite nicely. And there are ways you could easily do that with just a mono army as well. I think you'd basically sort of you'd have to have the principle that maybe half your army you would focus primarily on the larger scale units for your army. So, you know, big flyers if you're talking about Astartes, so Thunderhawks and Stormbirds for us, or your big super heavy tanks. You'd have big super heavy formations maybe to sort of allow yourself some ability to sort of relax in terms of number of units. I wouldn't necessarily want to run a 6,000 point army that was very much, oh, I'm bringing, you know, all these infantry units in minimum size units in order to play the game, because that would make life quite difficult in terms of number crunching and movement phases and stuff like that. It would make it more difficult. And again, that is another bonus about Legions, is you can run units in quite large numbers as well, even for the likes of the Auxilia and the Astartes. I mean, you're not running 8 individual tanks like you would in 40k. You can run 3 units of 10 tanks. So you can... There are easy ways of making the game more playable from that perspective, which I think works really well, because you're activating them all at the same time and performing all of your actions at the same time, while the game is also still more enjoyable and playable for both players because it's alternating activations, which, as we've discussed on podcasts already, is just the better way of running a war game. And probably any game in general, to be perfectly honest. So it'll be interesting to find out whether my theory holds true and you design your armies in such a way to make them more playable rather than necessarily trying to be the most optimal in terms of, you know, what is strategically the most efficient way of doing things. If I was to play a big game like that as well, what I'd probably say to make the game more playable is that you'd have to build your formations using the rule of maxing out the capacity of the detachments in the formation. So, for example, if I was to run a Barony Guard Lance for my Knights, I know that you need your 3 compulsory slots are 2 Questoris Lances and a Cerastus Lance. Well, if I was to implement this rule, then in order for me to continue to build another formation, I have to max out all the slots in that formation. So I'd have to go to the Questoris slot, and I would have to fill each slot with 3 Questoris pattern knights, but it doesn't matter what configuration I use. I can just use 3. I could do 3 different knight loadouts, or I can run, you know, a full unit of paladins or wardens or something like that. But I'd have to fill out and max out those 3 formations, 3 detachments within that formation, before I could go ahead and add a new formation. In addition, if you were to add any new detachments to that formation, then you must also max out that new unit before you can add in a new one. So if I was to then go in and say, right, well, this formation can have up to 2 Armiger Talons, and it can also have up to, I think, 1 extra Cerastus and 1 extra Questoris Lance. I think I might be wrong in that one. But let's assume that that's what it is. Well, if I wanted to add some more Cerastus, then I would say, right, I'm going to add in a Cerastus detachment here. However, but I also want to add in some Armigers. Well, I then have to max out that Cerastus detachment before I'm allowed to add in more Armigers. So I'd have to add in another 3 Cerastus Knights, and then I can add in some Armigers. And then if I wanted to add another unit of Armigers, well, I have to max that out to a full unit of 9 before I can move on. And that way you kind of, I think, would be able to control the way the army is built, so that for larger scale games, you also ensure that, although it's a larger scale game with more points involved, you're not using unwieldy numbers of detachments. And it helps to sort of keep everything more grounded, potentially. I think that works, in theory. Right, that Black Legion is super damp. It's been inundated with water from the wet palette. My wet palette is definitely too wet. I'll just add in a tiny drop next to it. Somewhere close on the palette, and don't need much. How are we doing for time? Ooh, we're doing alright. We've almost got all the armour panels in, just got to get the bronzing done. We might achieve the goal. That'll be Armiger done in 45 minutes. Well, almost done in 45 minutes. Uh-oh, I forgot the red on the guns. Oh dear. You always forget something, don't you? Well, I always do anyway. You might not. You might be better than me than this. It's fine. It's not a big issue. Quickly just whack this on. Quickly whack coat of red on. Might need to go back to it and add another quick coat of red. Once we've done a bit of the bronzing. There we go. Just on its faceplate. There and there. Switch over to the red quickly. Get those red bits done. Rim. Did the back side of it slightly. Don't worry about all of it because it's not going to be seen. I don't know why, but I quite like the Helverins. I mean, me personally, when it comes to like the knight suits, if I was to pilot a knight suit, I'd probably prefer something like a castigator, because I want to be able to shoot and fight. And I've seen the castigator used in Legions, and it's a great little weapon. It's not the most stabby of the Cerastus pattern knights. Well, it's not the most stabby. It's not the most stabby of the knights in general, but it is probably joint second with the Acheron in terms of stabby power. It only loses out to the Lancer, and that's only in like like a detachment engagement rather than a one-on-one, because the Lancers got the reach rule, so they can fight other units nearby, which is quite handy because they can kind of work together in tandem to take out other knights. But one-on-one, then they're no better than a castigator. So I quite like mixed loadout, range and melee. So that's why, in theory, I should love the Warglaive, because it's got the thermal lance to shoot, and it's also got the chain cleave to do some damage in combat. But I kind of prefer the Armigers. There's like the support unit, and I suppose that's because the support unit, I don't necessarily think that running up and smashing with the Armigers is the best option. I feel like these guys are a little bit more suited to their role, but then that's probably just my own bias, really. But it's a bias in the opposite direction to what I would normally go for, because I would normally congregate towards the tactically flexible rather than the specific. It's just funny how in different circumstances you prefer different things, I suppose. Which makes sense in some ways. So yeah, as far as big knights go, the Castigator is my preferred knight suit. I think this bronze is a little bit too wet as well. I'm going to have to get another little measure on me. Actually, I might just grab that red again quickly, because it looks like that's dried off pretty quick. We'll just put another coat on quickly. Not going to worry about the backs too much, because they're not really going to matter anyway. There we go. Just get that on there. Careful. I mean, I am trying to speed paint these a little bit, kind of just to see how quickly I can get them done, but try also to be a little bit careful, because I don't want to screw these up enough and repaint it all, because that would kind of defeat the point. Right, bronze, need a little bit more bronze. I think we can do it. I think we're going to get there. I ain't got much time left, 25 minutes. Might be touch and go. I definitely think an hour is probably the right level, because then you're not rushing, so to speak. But or at least an hour for me is probably the right number. I'd love to know how people paint so much faster than me. I'd love to be able to paint faster. But I'm doing alright. I think I worked out, if I get all my knights done and whatnot, I'll have painted, I can't remember now, something like 7,000 points of Legions in the last few months. In the last 6 months or so. And I've got to say the majority of that has actually been in the last few weeks. And I've painted, yeah, a huge amount in the last few months. Or weeks even. Which is quite impressive considering I don't think I've even painted that many points worth of 40k in the last 5 years. Just goes to show how much more enjoyable it is for me to paint. Painting entire armies in a few months rather than painting parts of armies over years. Still not as bad as some people I know. And if you're watching, you know who you are. All I'll say is I know a certain someone who, let's just say takes months to paint units. And to be honest, I'm surprised that they actually have an army that's playable. Because of how slow it takes, how slow they are for painting. But then again, they are a lot slower painting because, one, they're extremely busy and understandably so. But also their paintwork is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, if they weren't already committed to their full-time career, I'd be very much telling them to start a business as a professional miniatures painter, because they are just that good. But it does take a lot of time. But the results, they are probably worth the investment in time for this particular person, because that's the part of the hobby they probably enjoy the most. I think that's what they said to me, is that the painting it's either the most important part of the hobby for them, or is it's a big factor for them. I mean, they like playing the game. They play the game. We play games. Well, we used to play games almost every week, but with time being a bit more of a restrictive quantity at the moment, it's not really worked out that way. But we have played a few games recently. In fact, he actually managed to beat me in a game recently, which might sound a bit cocky, putting it like that. But to put it in perspective, I think we worked out. I had won about 34 games in a row. So for him to actually beat me this time round was quite an achievement. He was quite proud of himself, and I have to say he did a good job. He'd actually been listening to my advice from the previous games and managed to actually pull out a win. It was very close. It was literally, there was 1 point in secondaries in it. That was it. It was one of the probably closest games I've ever played. And I was really having to pull out every little trick in the book to achieve even the points I had in the end. So fair play, he did a good job. I'm proud of him for that. And obviously, I mean, I suppose you could argue he actually won by 11 points in the end, because if you gave him the extra points for actually having a fully painted army. Oh no, actually you wouldn't have, because he actually, for the first time ever, brought a model that wasn't painted, which is, as I say, he never does. So actually no, I stand corrected. It still would have been 1 point, but if we were giving bonus points for quality of paint, well, yeah, he'd have won by a country mile, as I only had, I think, 2 painted models on the table. And I'll be honest, as I've already said, really, his army is just so beautifully painted. Mine wouldn't even stand a chance if you got points for quality of paint. Wouldn't have even... Yeah, there's just no way. Wouldn't have stood a chance. And I've got quite a pile of shame myself, I have to say. So one thing I've decided to do with my legions is to not have a pile of shame. Just not having one. So every time I get a new kit, as soon as I get the kit, it gets on the painting desk and it gets painted. Which I've actually managed to achieve this year so far. Once I've painted those Pythurions, hopefully before Christmas, I'll have no pile of shame for legions until Christmas Day, and then I'll have a big pile of shame, which means I will then spend the next few weeks rapidly trying to paint it all up so that I have no pile of shame. Which puts me in a very awkward position because my birthday is in February, and normally what people buy me for Christmas tends to be Warhammer stuff, because that's what I do. It's a big part of what I do in life in general, so it tends to be the go-to option for presents. Now, the problem is if I ask for more Legion stuff for Christmas, I'll probably for my birthday, I'll probably end up with a lot of Christmas. I'll probably end up with another big pile of shame, which means I will spend the next 2 months or so absolutely hammered with painting. Which could be, well, quite a laborious task, because I don't want to have a pile of shame. My 40k pile of shame is already, or pile of potential, it's already quite big. And that's the other thing, I don't know, I do want to start a knight army for 40k, but I don't know if I want to have more boxes of stuff that I'm just not building or painting yet. So that would even be a risky option. Although it wouldn't be a bad option, I suppose, because I would then just go ahead and paint those up on stream probably, and slowly build up a 40k army. Which again might not be the worst thing in the world, but obviously the big issue of that is, well, they're big expensive kits, so probably not ideal to ask for a birthday present for most people. So we'll see. I don't know what I'll do about that one. Oh, such a nice problem to have, I suppose. Don't know what to ask for your birthday, because you don't know what you'll want most. Certainly a pleasant problem to have, if you're going to have a problem. We do have time. We can do it, we can do it. I think we're going to do it. painting more of these up in the future, but I will say for now I won't be upset to have these done for a little while, because this will be the, once I've done that, that'll be 18 of these done. Can you imagine me trying to paint a horde army? Yes, of course. Most of the armies I like have horde elements. But all the armies I like have horde elements, if not are just hordes. Almost there. We might achieve the goal. In fact, we might achieve the goal with time to spare. That's going to be pretty good. Okay, we are fast approaching, and I just realised I've probably spent the last few seconds in total silence, which is no good for you guys, because presumably you're here to hear me ramble rather than watch me paint, to be honest. But those of you who are just here for the satisfaction of watching an amateur paint, you're in luck, because that's all I've been doing. Those of you who wanted to hear me ramble, I mean, those of you who want to be here to hear me ramble might want to go and see a psychiatrist, but I've just left you in the dark for a few seconds there because I kind of got a little bit consumed with what I was doing there, but hopefully you can appreciate why, because I am trying to get these done in a quick and efficient way without messing it up, because that will just cause me more headaches in the future. My fingers don't want to grip. I really hope that's just that plaster that's causing me the problem today, and not just a inability to hold something, because that would be concerning. Well, I've done it. All the bronze is done. I've got 10 minutes left. 10 minutes to spare. However, before I do that, well, I can't just slap the wash straight on, because otherwise I'll cause myself some issues with paint smudging. So I'm going to grab my little square tip brush quickly, and I'm just going to quickly place those sandbags, you might be able to see at the bottom of that base, in some grey cere. So then I can whack some Agaros dunes on them in a minute. So that's the basing bit done for these guys, or for this Armiger. This might require a couple coats. These whites tend to need more than one coat to get nice coverage. I don't want any of the metal showing through here if there's sandbags. There we go. Quickly do that. That will need a second coat in a bit, but that's not a problem. Right. Let's get this done. 3 armigers in less than 3 hours. I mean, for you guys, 3 hours, but for me, less than 3 hours. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Just channel me inner orc there. Not with the proper full-on orc voice, which I get told off for sometimes. Especially when I do it around the house. Here we go, here we go. Get that wash all over that carapace. Get it in those stacks at the back on the gun. Get it inside there. Make sure I catch those shoulder pads. Make sure it's on the back. Onto the arms. Just making sure I don't pull too heavily. I did notice on one of the arms it pulled quite heavily in an area, but it's fine, it won't make a difference. Not enough for me to worry about anyway. Although, as you can probably tell, I don't tend to worry about these things anyway. It's only if it's really bad I'll go back in and sort it. I just tend to find it just looks like a bit of grime or oil spill or something. As long as it's only in that one spot, it's probably fine. A bit more. There we have it. We've done it. We have 7 minutes to spare. There we go. 3 Helverins, 90% painted in under 3 hours. Stick a fork in me, I'm done. I mean, I'm not done at all. I shall be doing some more of these today. I'm going to try and get the other 6 done today, or before the end of today. So I can finish them off tomorrow, get the tokens all sorted as well, and then hopefully it'll be a case of cracking on with the Pytherions tomorrow evening, and potentially trying to finish them off Christmas Eve. It's going to be very touch and go whether I'm going to get them all done, but we're almost there. We're almost there. Nearly 4,000 points of Knights finished in about a month. That's about 1,000 points a week. It's not bad, considering I'm out of work and I've had several games as well, interrupting all of that as well. So it's been quite good, I have to say. I've done quite well. Right, I'm just going to quickly show you a close-up of this guy that we did previously. I won't bother showing the other one because it's going to be wet and shiny. This is the other one. It's all done. There we go. Then the other one obviously looks pretty similar to that, just slightly different pose. Obviously his basing material is not finished either. But yeah, that's rather successful. That's our 3 little armigers there done, up in that corner there. Oh, shortcut's not working. There we go. Well, there we go. That is me done for today. Or certainly on stream anyway. So thank you very much for watching, or for listening, or both, whichever it is that suited you for this particular session. I do hope you will join me in the future on a Sunday hobby haul, and please do keep an eye out for new content that we will be bringing out over the next few months. We've got lots of plans and lots of new stuff coming, lots of improvements will be made, and hopefully we'll see an increase in not only quantity but also quality. If I don't post out or do anything before Christmas, then I would like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas. You will be seeing me again before New Year's though, so I won't need to do that one. I'll be back normal time next Sunday, just ahead of New Year, just after Christmas, probably showing off and painting up some new stuff that happened over Christmas, and I'm sure hopefully you'll be sat there joining me doing the same. So without further ado, please do remember to check out all of our socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Don't think I'm missing anything else there. Yep, no, I think that's it. And obviously do check out our YouTube channel, which is our main port of content as well, which is primarily podcasts at the moment, but more content is on the way very, very, very soon. And also, if you would like to continue to listen to me ramble on, you can check out last week's live stream, which was recorded and is now uploading to YouTube and will be releasing in about 3 minutes as of this message. So if you want a little bit more and see some more painting and listen to me ramble about whatever I was rambling about last week, feel free to stay tuned. But if not, see you soon, have a good time, and I'll see you next time in the Mead Hall. Goodbye for now.